There's so much more to talk about here, and I want to invite into the program somebody we all know very well. That is Senator Sherrod Brown from Ohio. He is joining us to talk about the economy and so many different things. And Senator, it's always good to see you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Adam. You too. Thank you.
But before I jump into some of the points you've raised in your most recent op-ed, I just want to get past the most recent headline, because I know some Democrats were briefed by the White House about this news that Russia was paying Taliban soldiers to kill our soldiers. Is there any kind of uniform Democratic response to how the White House has handled this? Because the president has a relationship with Russia and Putin, but allegedly was told about this several months ago.
Well, there's no Democratic position. I haven't called Senator Schumer and say, what do you want me to say? I talk to my colleagues all the time about all different kinds of issues, but there's a unanimous outcry and disgust that the President of the United States, because he and Putin are so close, seems to disregard any kind of quote unquote bad news about Putin and a relationship between the U.S. and Russia on the one hand. On the other hand, that maybe the president did know about this because he doesn't read his briefings. He doesn't listen to his staff, and his staff is so intimidated by ever giving him bad news because they know like that they could be fired. So it's a dysfunctional place. The White House, and American soldiers die as a result. And it just breaks my heart. And I think that, it's not just Democrats think that, it's Republicans think that. They're pretty scared of this president. They have not exactly shown great spine in the last 3 years, and they're afraid of the president calling them a name and coming into their states and campaigning perhaps against them. But it's a sordid chapter, one more sordid chapter in foreign policy.
Let's turn to domestic policy and
Sure.
the economy, because you just had an op-ed. I'm going to give some of the key points of what you're talking about. Raise base pay for all employees to a living wage, a minimum of $15 an hour. Stop forcing people to choose between their jobs and their families' grant paid sick leave. And then end the independent contractor business model. Tell me more about what you're pushing for here, because so many essential employees, you use the example of a grocery store clerk. I used to shop at Heinen's when I lived on the North Coast in Ohio. What is it you want all of us to understand about what's going on economically?
Yeah, I was speaking of Heinen's. This was not a Heinen's store, but I was talking to a grocery store worker in Southwest Ohio, and she said, they call me essential, but really I feel like I'm expendable. They don't pay me much, and I don't have particularly a good protection at work. When you think about that, you go to work every day, whether you're a grocery store worker, a bus driver, a hospital worker, a food preparer, a custodian, all kinds of people go to work every day at barely adequate wages. They have to be fearful, concerned about their safety at work from their employees who wear masks, usually their fellow employees. The customers often don't, in large part because we haven't pushed that in this society from the top. And then they go home and are concerned about the health of their families, about infecting them. So I just wrote this letter saying to employers, don't just run ads saying thank you to these employees. Start paying them more, paying them a living wage, allow them to organize a union if they want to, implement really strong worker safety standards, give them pandemic premium pay. That's one of the things we're trying to do. Speaker Pelosi did that in the HEROES Act. We want to do that in the House version. Stop lobbying Congress for more CEO pay and tax cuts and all of that, and start paying attention to diversity in your workplace.
Senator Brown, Brian Chung here. I want to talk about the economic efforts from the Federal Reserve's part. The Congress had tasked the Federal Reserve with a number of things in response to this crisis through the CARES Act. I'm wondering if you were to grade the Federal Reserve's response so far. Their Main Street lending program is kind of not yet fully started up yet. Money's not necessarily going to borrowers' hands yet. How would you assess the status of the Federal Reserve's reaction here? And would you like to see the Fed doing certain things with the amount of money that it hasn't used that Congress appropriated it?
Yeah, I would first of all grade, this wasn't your question exactly, but I'd grade the Fed, the Treasury, a much lower rate than the Fed. The Treasury seems more about rewarding the president's friends than it does helping small business and minority institutions and the like. The Fed's a mixed bag. This week, I was critical of the Fed because they, in their most recent decision after the stress tests that the Fed's required to do, are allowing corporations to distribute dividends for the next quarter to to their stockholders, which generally enriches the wealthiest 1 or 2 or 5% of the country. I understand these companies, these investors own stock, but we're doing that. They're allowing that in the midst of this crisis when several large banks barely passed their stress tests. And these stress tests have gotten easier since the Trump administration. And I'm very concerned about the security and the strength of these banks. So the Fed on that hand, in terms of regulation, is doing a poor job. In terms of trying to help the economy, they're doing a more adequate job, but lots need to be done.
Senator, many of us remember when you stood up to Orrin Hatch, and I know you respected him. He was a friend and a colleague, but during tax reform, we just had Gary Cohn on our program recently, and he said it's time to raise the corporate tax rate possibly to 28%, almost vindicates what you and your colleagues were saying. What do you say now about raising taxes? Because we know the Republicans wouldn't go there, but the Democrats are going to push it. What's the likelihood that it will happen?
Well, Republicans are now asking, they're circulating letters around for the next McConnell package, if there is one, for the next stimulus package, to give, again, major tax cuts to corporations. I mean, the problem isn't the tax rate for corporations. The problem is putting money in people's pockets. And I'll do whatever it takes. I know what that unemployment meant to keep people from evictions. And I am very alarmed if we do nothing in the next month. And that seems to be what Senator McConnell is proposing. He says he sees no urgency. And the $600 a week for unemployed workers, there will still be hundreds of thousands of unemployed workers just in the state Adam used to live in the state I represent, Ohio. There will be hundreds of thousands of unemployed workers come Labor Day. We know that. And if they lose their unemployment benefits, we win. And the moratorium on evictions and foreclosures expires, we're going to see so many people be evicted. And to the tens of thousands, I don't know how many in my state and across the country. And what does that mean in the middle of a pandemic? More homeless people, more people in homeless shelters, more people living in their cousins' basements when they're put together in an unhealthy situation. And we'll never get this pandemic under control if we pull back on helping state and local government, helping schools, helping individuals, putting money in their pockets. Enough of the tax cut for the rich talk. That's their solution to every problem. It didn't work, as Gary Cohn, Trump administration chief economic advisor at the time the tax bill passed, Gary Cohn's already stepping back, saying that didn't work. So it's pretty clear the solution of always giving tax cuts to rich people, which is what Mitch McConnell seems to live for, just doesn't work for our country.
A good friend of mine was just laid off at what used to be LTV, ISG, and Middle Steel in the Flat. Senator, unfortunately, we never get enough time with you. Thank you for being here on The Move with us. We're going to be
glad to do it again. Sorry about being late. I had a tax committee meeting. Thank you.